Hey, it's Kisha here with Defending the Early Years podcast. We'll be focusing on amplifying the voices of early childhood educators, advocates, and all of those who love children. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. I'm Kisha Reed here today, and I'm holding a book, a little blue book. This little blue book has been next to my bedside for quite a while. It is called Illuminating Care, the Pedagogy and Practice of Care in Early Childhood Communities. And it is written by our guest today, Carol Garboden-Murray. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Kisha.
Oh, Carol, this book, I know we're going to talk a lot about it today, but I just want to start by saying, oh my goodness, everybody who works with children, who has a child, who sees children about in the world needs to read this book. And I am not just saying that. Like, there are some concepts and some ideas and some thought processes in this book that me, being someone who's worked in the field for 27 years and really understands play-based or care-based, just care in general, is still finding ways of thinking in here that are waking up something inside of me, something new, something fresh, a different way of thinking about it, or just a way of like advocating for what I already know is right. So I just want to thank you for this work. And I want to give you the floor to tell us who you are, where this came from, and why this is your perspective.
Thank you so much. When I heard you speaking, I was finishing up the book. I don't know if I heard you on, I think it was maybe with Teacher Tom, and just the way you spoke about learning and play and this sort of, this way of recognizing that life is not separate from learning. I knew that you would love this book like I do, because this book has been my teacher. I mean, I've been writing it for a lot of years. I never sat down with a pencil thinking I knew what I was talking about. I just sort of started investigating this idea of care. As an early childhood teacher, my whole life, I have been grappling with this question, which is, how do we define care, and why is it that it's so hard to talk about this part of our work? And those questions, I really started thinking about that question deeply after I worked in the public school. Most of my career, all of my career, I've been with 0 to 5, but there were a few years when I was with older kids, still young kids, kindergarten, first, second graders. But after having the public school experience with, chalkboards and desks and hallways and all these things we consider school-like, I went back to early childhood, took the first opportunity I could to get back with the younger, because that's where my calling is. And having that contrast, leaving the public school, going back to work in a nursery school childcare setting, holding those toddlers, helping them put on their mittens, helping them separate from their parents, preparing snack for them, and sitting with them at lunchtime. All those caring rituals became so obvious to me, that this is so unique. It's such a grounded part of our practice, how we spend these interactions, how we see this encounter with the child when we are in these, I guess, like pathways of care, because the kids are developing their sense of themselves through care, right? Through these bodily functions, learning to sit on the toilet, learning to have a relationship with food and to use the fork, and learning to put on their own coat. These are just such significant milestones for kids 0 to 5. And I feel like they're often the invisible part of our work, the part that hasn't been talked about much.
And it's interesting that you talk about the contrast between the early childhood environment in the public school or older children's facilities.
Yeah.
I experienced that myself. I taught a kindergarten enrichment program, which was in the kindergarten wing of a public elementary school. And I had this thought or this observation that I could tell the difference between the adults who had worked in early childhood or who had their start in early childhood versus those who hadn't. And the way I could tell was by the way that they cared for the children.
Yeah.
the way
Isn't
that
it
they
wonderful?
engaged with the children. It was, like you said, just a stark difference to me. So the same as you, I went from that environment back to an early childhood environment, and it just sat with me, the difference, or the lack of, sometimes it's not intention. Sometimes it's
Right.
the lack of time, the
Yeah.
lack of, the number of children, that the sheer number of children that they have in their classrooms doesn't give them the opportunity to work one-on-one, or in such an intimate way as we can in early childhood because of our ratios.
Yeah.
We have less children to adult. um those are things that I would love to see change, because
Me too.
work, yeah, all humans need that, but especially all young children. And I would say third grade and under all need the care aspect of education, which,
It's
as we
yeah.
agree, is the same thing. You can't separate the two. Once you turn 5, it doesn't just turn off and you no longer need the care part. And I think with COVID, we saw that,
Yes.
our
Yes.
school system serves more purpose than just the education piece. It serves a
It's
care
so
piece. There are some children who will not eat healthy food if they're not in a school system. There are some children who will not have an adult to care for them during the day if they're not in the school system. So we need to reckon with the idea that our public schools are also childcare facilities.
yes, yes, yes. I think that's so powerful. The first and second and third grade teacher doesn't have to defend themselves as much as we do. Well, actually, we heard them saying, right, the same things we were saying, like, "Hey, I'm not a babysitter, I'm a teacher," during COVID.
Mhm.
And I was trying to kind of flip that on its head when I kept hearing people say that. Like, don't devalue that part of your educational role in children's lives. Don't devalue that care part. Let's not try to step on the backs of babysitters and childcare providers and aunts and uncles and grandparents. Anyone who takes care of a child is doing really important work. And
Mhm.
it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about my public school experience, not only as a teacher, but also as a parent. And when I was in the public school, I had quite a few kids with special needs in my class. So I had a lot of paraprofessionals working with me. And I often didn't take lunch breaks myself because I couldn't let my kids with special needs go into the cafeteria or the hallway alone. I mean, they really needed support. And so it did open my eyes to this dichotomy between, what we think of as learning time, and then what we think of as care or drudgery or mundane or less than learning. This separation, because you meet all these people who work in the cafeteria, these people who monitor the hallways, these people who help children on the playground, these wonderful supportive paraprofessionals who often are not included in those educational professional development environments. They're thought of as less than. And I just often thought, when I saw my own children going off to school, and when I was in that setting, like, what if, the people in the cafeteria and the people who drive the buses, and what if we were more integrated with them as teachers? And what if we had a collaborative with them where we said, what you do is so essential. And the child who's in first, second, third, fourth grade, they might really have a stronger impression about themselves as a learner when they're eating lunch in that busy cafeteria than they have the rest of the day. The thing that might really stick in their mind is that bus ride. It's like the child is whole. And
Mhm.
the child is a physical being too, right? And an emotional being. So I think looking at care helped me see how we set up these false dichotomies between the emotion and logic, and between care and education, between play and learning.
Mhm.
Um,
Recently, there was a post on our town Facebook page, and it was a parent who was looking for, not daycare. I don't want daycare. We don't need daycare. I need preschool. I'm looking
yes,
for preschool. And it took everything inside me not to reply, what is the
I know,
difference?
I
Because
know.
I would like to know what the perceived, we're talking about definitions, defining care, defining play, defining these things. I would like to know what is the perceived definition of both of those. What is the difference? What is it that you're not wanting? um that is daycare or childcare, and what is it that you are wanting that is preschool? Because I feel like if we have these conversations and we're saying this out loud, we may realize that a lot of it is we're seeking the same things. We're just not understanding how to actually put that in practice.
I think
So,
that's so, yeah, I think that's so true. Like, because we get defensive. I do. I mean, I just posted on Facebook recently that I was at the hygienist, and she was asking me
mhm.
a little bit about how, how my day's going, where do I work? And I said, oh, I work at the college. And she said, oh, are you a professor? And I said, no, I run the child care nursery school program. And she was like, oh, how cute. That's so cute. Is it a daycare, or do the kids actually have little lessons? Or so, she
Mm,
said something like that. It was felt so patronizing and so, but I mean, she was a lovely person, and she didn't understand. And I think defensiveness doesn't help us. So
yes.
how do we meet people where they are? And actually, it's true what you said. We do have more in common than than not. And I think we can find ways to not be so defensive, but to try to say yes to people. Yes, it's a childcare center. Yes, it's a
Mhm.
school. Yes, children learn through play, and children learn through care. And we really believe that the highest quality, most rigorous, most meaningful programs integrate care and play and education. It's really all the same thing. How can we take that leap to that conversation that's going to help us bridge that gap for people?
Yes. And that took a while for me because
Me too.
yeah, I feel like I'm getting there. I still have the feelings, but I'm able to, stifle those down inside while I do say some of the things that you just said. Like, play is the way that children learn. And then I always engage them in a conversation about their own childhood because that sparks something where they start, oh, okay, that makes sense. I remember I had quite the conversation with my aunt who was adamant. I mean, she was doing a good job of pushing back with me, adamant about children need at some point, they need to sit down and blah, blah, blah. So we had this really good conversation about what it looks like when you allow a child to learn naturally, what it looks like when you support a child through play, what is developing, what is happening. And she was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I get it. And I think more recently, prior to the last few years, I think I was letting myself become defensive in a way that it wasn't showing all of the information that's out there, all of the research that's out there that backs what we know is right. So we don't necessarily need to be on the defensive because we're the ones with all the research and the information. So we have less to defend, I think. We can just share what we know and put it out there like you have put it out there with this book. And I think that people will latch on to it once they see it, and once we're not defensive, and once we're not falling into, I think sometimes we fall into the position that society has put us in
Yeah.
because we'll say, well, I'm not childcare, well, I'm not daycare, I'm a school, well, I'm a I'm a preschool, or I'm a, somehow trying to, we do worksheets because, whatever it is that makes us feel more, I guess, respected.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
that teachers are the most respected thing in our society at all, but it is a step above childcare workers, as we're called. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes we find programs trying to look more like school or act more like school in order to gain that respect that we feel like we're missing out on. And
I've
that's
been,
what,
yeah, that's amazing. I've been thinking so much about that same thing. I've been like really like, I mean, there's a lot of things I wrote about in the book that just I just feel like I'm just on the edge of like a really deep understanding about myself. And it's this idea of the sort of the collective identity. Like we have this identity crisis as early childhood people. So there's some healing that we have to do because, like you said, we've been in this defensive protective mode, and we've had to be. And we are advocates, and we see some practices that are just appalling. We see things that just, they make our skin crawl because we respect children, we love children, we know children, and we know children deserve more. So we we have that part of us, the child advocacy part of us, and then we have the professional part of us too. Like, we have studied child development, we have worked with hundreds of children, we have got our certificates and our degrees, we know what we're talking about. Come on, people, we feel defensive. We are not, we are teachers, and we're not less than someone who teaches college or high school. We are at the foundation. What we believe what we're doing is the most important work. So there's this fight, there's this defensiveness, there's this strong advocacy piece that is powerful. And I'm trying to figure out how to hold on to that without falling into polarization, right? Like you said, like, it's not this or that. It's like, how do we find a middle ground? So moving from like a fighting, defending mode to more of a dialogue, finding a chord, finding agreements, finding ways I can say yes and people can say yes back to me. I think your idea of just helping people remember their childhood is so powerful. That's a great way we can connect with people. And then, I had this experience recently of teaching in a school where I didn't have to defend play. I mean, it was 9 years of my career where everyone pretty much believed in play and care, and in this idea that we wanted children to be children. And we had this beautiful habitat where we were cooking together and going for nature walks together and diving into the children's play. I mean, really making for me, some huge gains in my understanding of play and emergent curriculum and care pedagogy. For me, that was so rich because I wasn't in a place of defending it. And I realized I was working in a bubble. I came out from that experience and into the world again. I was like, okay, wow, I guess we are in some sort of big societal shift, but it's just not moving, simultaneously in all environments and in all settings. And there are still some things out there that are really appalling, things that we do have to get up on our soapbox with and have a bit of this defensive fighting. But I guess, I'm thinking about, like, what is your physical, like, think of it in your body. How does it feel to defend and fight? It feels like it takes a lot of energy,
Yes,
right?
it takes a lot out of you. Yes, it does. It does.
And then if you think, like, how does it feel just to do what you believe in and to have more of an open arms stance? Like, this is what we do. Yes. When a parent says, are you going to ever teach my 3-year-old to write his name? Instead of saying, oh, can we say, yes, of course. Look what they're doing. Look at this circle. They just made their first circle. This is a miracle. And look at these scribbles. They're going to need to make all these vertical and horizontal lines and these scribbles and understanding the directionality of left to right and how to design something on a piece of paper. All these things they're doing right now. Yes, we're teaching them to write. Instead, how can we get on that yes page and that dialogue, and then we learn a lot more too about, because, like, as a director of a childcare program, you say things over and over again, and how can we say them better, and
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
sometimes
How
I
can we
learned.
open up doors instead of closed doors? And I know I'm
Yes,
guilty of that too,
me too, me
because
too.
I'm quick to say, nope, we don't do that. We don't do this. We don't do this. We don't do this. Instead of saying, yes, we do that. This is how we do that. It could be,
Yeah,
we're working with clay because that's going to strengthen those fingers and all of, just explaining to them those processes. And
yes,
one thing that I have found in my work is the more we communicate and share that the processes with parents, the more they get it, the more they
yeah,
value the process over that end product. They start to shift. And I'm trying to figure out how I can take that, because I'm really comfortable with doing that within my school. And I'm also oddly comfortable with doing that outside in the greater world. But I feel like I'm not doing it as much, like right outside of the gates of my school, like
mm,
right in the community where I'm at. You know,
mm,
I'm kind of
that's
like,
interesting.
play people will come to us. And then when they come to us, we'll share with them every day the documentation and all these things, and they'll understand why we do what we do. And then I have this audience way outside of that where I'm super comfortable because they kind of get it or they want to get it, versus the community who are right outside my door who haven't
Yeah,
really sought me out or don't understand it. I think I haven't put in the work to not necessarily to get them to enroll, but just to shift society,
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
understand what we do and also what children need, what is
Yes.
right and good for them.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
before we get out of time, I do want to get back to the book. I want you to tell us why the name Illuminating Care. Where did that come from? Because I think it's genius. And then
Uh,
tell us, in the book there are some I don't there are some are they lanterns?
lamps. Yes. Lamps.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the lamps. I really love the way that this is structured. I mean, it really, I get it. But tell us about why you named the book Illuminating Care. And if you can, tell us a little bit about the lamps.
Great. Great. Yes. Well, I was really struggling with how to divide up the ideas I was thinking about. And should I call them care concepts or principles, or, I am really more of a thinker and a philosopher. And I really struggle in terms of giving people advice, which drives a lot of people I work with a little crazy, but I want people to think for themselves, and I don't want to see, like, oh, Carol thinks we should do this, or this is a principle. And I feel like a lot of this work I've been doing with care ethics has been kind of breaking down old dichotomies, old hierarchies, old principles that we've kind of assumed education is built on. So I didn't know how to talk about it, and I came upon this idea of a light or a lantern or a lamp because I figured that, it's not so hard. It's softer. Light it will shine in the darkness because care is invisible. Care is one of those things that we need to shine a light on because it's assumed. It's been in the domain of women. It's been in the domain of underappreciated, and it hasn't been named. So there's this invisibility, and the light can be brighter depending on if we're, like if we talk about the lamps. I call them the lamps of care because I also like to think about domesticity and home versus institutions. So if the first lamp of care is education. And then as I start to think about how care is learning and care is education, I think about care as a right, which is the second lamp of care. But then that could actually be the first lamp of care. And actually, those things kind of turn into the same. So those two lamps or lights can be right next to each other, and then they merge as one. So I don't like these distinct categories that we
Mhm.
have to usually use when we are defending, when we are bridging and finding ways to dialogue with people. We usually have to pull in a lot of language that people understand. So we talk about pre-literacy and science and mathematical thinking, and we pull all those words from academia, right? But those are very categorical and very clear. So I think the lamp is also clear, but it is a different way of sort of categorizing or thinking about learning because it can become whole. All 7 categories can become one. And it's just comes back to this respect of childhood, respect of care, care as an ethic. It's not just about taking good care of little children, which of course is our primary goal, but it's also about caring for ourselves. It's also about caring for elders, and it's also about caring for colleagues. There's never a time in our life when care isn't essential, and when this understanding of our interdependence on each other, our need for each other, our reliance upon each other, our neediness is not a weakness. It's an indication that we're human.
Yes.
So
Yes. And in this, as you're talking about care for ourselves and for our elders and for the children and for even the environment, it
yes,
brings me to a place where um I'm becoming super pulled to the work of community as a
yes,
whole.
yes,
Not just because we talked about children are whole beings. I think you said that at the beginning of this. Children are whole beings. It might have been off air, but children are whole beings. They come to us with a family, they come to us with, experiences and understandings, and they come to us out of a community. And I think that our work expands past, or should expand past, the walls of our building.
Yes.
expands past just the care of the children in front of us. I
Yes.
think it's much larger than that, especially if we want a shift in society that we agree that we want. It's going to be much larger than that. So I've really been lately starting to shift my focus on how do we, one, bring the children into the community, and two, bring the community into our program. How do we care for each other? How do we do that? How do we support the children in developing themselves a caring spirit? Like,
Yes.
I don't want this to just be something that they experience for these early years, but kind of something that sticks around with them, like outwardly, something that they're giving back, and something that they understand that they deserve to receive
Mhm.
ongoing after they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up
Yes.
into adulthood. And how much different would the world be if we were leading our lives with care at the forefront?
Yes. Yes. I think it does illuminate this shift we are hopefully in as a society from a domination model, from a hierarchy, from a top down. We believe in play, we believe in this sort of progressive constructivist approach, and that involves a shift in the way we think about our encounters with other people. And that's what I love about care ethics. It talks so much about partnership and the other and the encounter. And in that sort of analysis of what is this? What is this that brings us into an encounter and into a relationship with another person? There's so much thought about respecting the other and knowing that the other has their own direction. So it helps me shift my idea from education about being about change, more about education is about growth. I'm not trying to fix someone. I am
Mhm.
supporting, right? I'm supporting someone's
Yes.
transformation, because when we're caring for kids, we get stuck in all these little weird, you know, almost like power struggles, around what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear, and when you're full, and when you need to take another bite, and when you need to go to sleep. And the child knows that this is my body and I am in control of my body. So those things often become power struggles.
Yep.
And so I just found thinking about the other and the encounter, and the child having his own body, her own direction, their own purpose. It's not mine.
Yep.
And they need to express themselves. Yes, care is a partnership. So it brings us into this protective role as the child's leader. We are responsible for providing healthy food, but we can't force the child to eat, right? The child knows
Exactly.
when they are full or hungry. We are responsible for caring, um, but we also are human ourselves. And so I just think it elevates this way that we kind of grapple with the issues of human development as we care for children. It's not automatic. It's not something that is we can just, okay, every kid needs to, clean their plate or whatever. It's not automatic. Every kid's different. Every caregiver is different. Every teacher's different. So this encounter of the other, what is that about? And how do we not only sort of value our approach, our attitude when we're engaged in this caring encounter, but how do we talk about the very elemental aspects of that, which are the bodily aspects? It's again honoring the body. Our hands are important. The child's body, all those senses of taste and smell and movement. Um, Often we don't value the body. We just talk about, oh, these are things we care about, and this is how we're nice to each other, and this is how we're friendly. But you can really break it down to this very practical work, which looks at the body. And I think that also validates parents and women, because sometimes I think when they want more, they want, like, what are you going to teach my child? How is this learning? How am I going to get something more than they get at home? We can kind of turn to them and say, you know what? Home is the starting point, and you are enough. And all those baths that you gave your kid, all those
Mhm.
times that you showed up with your child at mealtime, those were the moments that counted. And it may have seemed mundane, it may have seemed custodial, it may have seemed tiring at times, but those are the experiences where the child gained the truest sense of themselves in relationship with another. And without that relationship with another, there's no way to form a strong identity. So there's all these amazing deep paradoxes in this very, very simple interaction that we think of as care.
Mhm. And what I notice is in programs where we're focused on care and just the slowing down and the doing the things like putting on shoes, making snack together, just the things that are just taking care of each other, and we value that over the the lesson plan, or the art project, or shuffling children from point A to point B. What I noticed are much more happy, whole children who don't feel uprooted, who
Right.
feel they just seem anchored and settled and comfortable because those needs are met, and it's predictable that they know that those needs are going to be met in a way that is respectful of where they are. This whole thing about independence and doing it yourself, great, you know
Yeah.
but it's about codependence, it's about community, it's about supporting each other, it's about helping a child do something that maybe they can't do on their own. But for me, when I'm supporting a child, whether they can do it or not, there are some days where a child who I know can do it, I know you can put on your shoes, but they, for some reason, I don't know what the reason is today, they want me to help them.
Yeah.
So I offer that to me means they need something. They need a connection. They need development is not linear. Maybe they could do it yesterday and today they just they're hungry, they're tired, whatever. They can't. So I will support them in a way that in the end of it, they feel a couple things. They feel love,
Mm.
they feel accepted for who they are in that very moment. I'm not reminding them who they were yesterday. I'm accepting them for who they are in that very moment. And they feel accomplished
Mm.
because it is done in a way that we did it together. Or even if they just, I mean, I've had children who are like, I can't, and they just won't or can't.
Yeah.
They're not even supporting,
Right.
and I make it, I kind of make it a little bit bigger. Oh, I'll do it for you. Let's give me
Mhm.
give me that foot. I'll do it for you. Oh, can you push a little bit? And
Yeah.
and you see a shift in them where they're like, oh, it's almost like I was just checking if you would do it, you would do it for me,
Yeah.
and you will. So
Yeah.
here, let me give you a little bit back. And it's just those little. There's a part in your book that talks about the art of caregiving,
Mm.
and there's just those moments where it's an art. You make a decision. How am I going to support this child in this moment? And in the book,
Mm.
it talks about. And I was just I started and highlighted it and dog-eared the page because it is something that I try to, even in the moment, think about with my own children at home and with the children at the school. How am I going to react to this? How am I going to support them through this? How, and I'm not perfect. I don't always do it right, but I really try to think about, for example, two children in the heat of conflict. Even if I know that one child is the aggressor and that they did something that they weren't supposed to do, I try to engage those two children in the most non-judgmental way I can and just
Yeah.
get on their level and just acknowledge both of them. Just
Mhm.
acknowledge the feeling, just acknowledge the experience. And in your book, it was talking about touch and just putting your hand on their back at just the right time and just the right way. I have seen children go from the height of conflict to just taking a deep breath and shifting just because of the way that a hand was placed on their back, and just the body language and the eye contact, and just the belief that you're going to be heard and you're going to be accepted regardless.
I
And
love
I
that.
think that is that more than anything we can do, that relationship and that care and that trust that we build is our work. Like
It's so good. It's so
that is what we do.
It's so good, and we were talking about how, suddenly kids in kindergarten and they're supposed to do it all by themselves, or they're supposed to be big kids, but we do that a lot to 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yes.
like, and I think it's like, again, I find myself in those conversations with parents, like my 4-year-old knows how to get dressed, but they are battling me every day with these shoes and these socks, and just reminding parents they are only 4. And like you said, you don't know why they are having those battles over their shoes and socks. And maybe it's because you're pregnant and the new baby's coming and they want to
Mm-hmm.
know that they are a baby still in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a deep philosophical, psychological grappling that they have about growing up. I mean, they are in the midst of this gigantic change. And sometimes it's an incredible amount of work for a 4-year-old to get themselves dressed. They can do it in a snap when they're super motivated, but sometimes it's exhausting
Yeah.
getting things backwards and upside down. And we forget about what gigantic leaps they have taken in their physical selves, and how that must work in tandem with impulse control and language and emotional development. It's a big task.
It is.
And I think we could say a lot more about
Yes.
that whole push on, do it yourself, do it yourself, do it yourself, and give teachers and give all adults that care for children, parents included, give them a break, that it does really feel good to be cared for.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is okay to meet your kid halfway. It is okay to pick up your 4 and 5-year-old and put their coat on for them. Sometimes it does feel good. How good does it feel to you when someone cares for you and you're an
Yeah.
adult? There's plenty of things, I love it when someone else makes me dinner, right? I can do it myself, but wow, what a difference. What a difference when someone else cares for me. And my kids are teenagers and college kids now, so I see, they want mom to make them the egg sandwich for breakfast still, even though they can
Yep.
do it themselves.
Yep. My daughter came back home for the holidays, and the first thing that she said to her dad was she wanted her favorite dinner. And she
Uh,
can cook. She cooks a lot when she's at school, but when she's home, she wants to go back to that space where she's being cared for. We never
yeah,
lose that.
we
Well,
don't.
Carol, I have enjoyed this conversation. We could go on and on and on, and hopefully you will come back, because there are so many aspects of this work that we can talk about and dig into, and get,
It's,
just get our feet. We're just getting our feet wet.
you're,
So
you're
if
you're right.
if you could tell us how can people get their hands on this book? How can they find you? And any last tips or bits of, I know you don't like to give advice, so any last minute illuminating any last minute illuminating that you want to give our listeners?
Oh my gosh. Well, it is really a pleasure talking to you. I so value these dialogues that we're having on Zoom and podcast, and what a great community. I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing in defending children and
Well, thank you so much
advocating.
for your work.
It's just
Thank you.
it's so inspiring. I'm so excited about it. So Illuminating Care is published by Exchange Press, and I think it's on Amazon, but only on the Kindle version. I think Red Leaf is carrying it now too. I think it's on back order right now. So
Okay.
Illuminating Care through Exchange Press is the wonderful people that helped get this book into print. And I am on Facebook, Illuminating Care, and Carol Garboden-Murray. You can find my website, Carol Garboden-Murray, and you can find a bunch of articles that I have written on this topic. If you just want to, I think on Kindle, you could even read like the first 10 pages for free on Amazon if you want to get a taste for it. But
Wonderful.
thank you so
Well,
much. It's great.
you're welcome. Thank you
I
for
thank you,
coming. Thank you
everyone.
for coming to the
Thank you.
show. Everybody get this book. Get this book for yourself. Get this book if you're a director. Get this book for your staff. This is a wonderful book to use as a book club for your staff or your parents. Get this book. Thank you so much, Carol. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you again on the Defending the Early Years podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And that was another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Defending the Early Years works to support the rights and needs of young children nationally. Learn more at DEY.org. Pay us a visit, sign up for our newsletter, or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.